So hi, everybody. This is basically where I'll be teaching the class. Welcome to Craft Jam. We used to be an in-life company, an IRL company that was located on Sullivan Street in Soho, where people would come, strangers, friends, sit together around a table and learn a craft, basic craft. So you're making friends, you're calming yourself down. You're not, although we are on our devices, but we're not working on our devices. I'll tell you just a quick story about my background. I was in the garment industry for 38 years. I have been embroidering since childhood. I have a mother who's from Mexico City, and it was very traditional. We spent our summers there. Grandmother, mother, and children all sat around crafting, embroidering, knitting. It's a beautiful thing to do if any of you have children or family or good friends. Instead of watching a movie or combine food, drink, and craft. It's therapeutic, it's good for the planet, it's good for your mind. I retired about 5 years ago and realized that I was embroidering all the time. So I study at the Royal School of Needlework in London. Sadly, it's a summer program, so my last time there was in 2019. So you're in very good hands. However, you don't need to know a million stitches to learn embroidery and to enjoy embroidery. I'm going to teach you the basics. I'm going to teach you how to take it from your concept of design, whether you're doing it on a garment or you're doing it on fabric or you're making a sachet. So how to transfer a pattern onto fabric, how to do some basic stitching, how to finish your garments. Maybe we'll talk about some visible mending. If anybody's working on garments, I've been doing a lot of workshops on that, on sustainability. And the whole thing is really just have fun. So if any of you, I know that you have a different kit than the Craft Jam kit, which actually, frankly, even if you just had one of those sewing kits from the hotels, you can embroider. And that's the beauty of embroidery. It's a very inexpensive hobby. Whereas knitting, crocheting, needlepoint, the canvases are expensive. With embroidery, you can use a pillowcase. You can use a sheet that, cut up old fabric. You can have a t-shirt that has or a shirt. So you don't have to spend a lot of money. But let's talk about what you do need. So explore always and go get it. And that's what we're going to do today. So I will start with the basics. In order to embroider, you need a hoop. And hoops come in various sizes. A hoop has two purposes. And if you're going to be stitching on a knit, I'll give you one instruction, and a knit meaning a t-shirt or a sweatshirt. If you're stitching on like a woven shirt or denim jeans or a tote bag, I'll tell you a different way to use your hoop. But the hoop is meant to stabilize your fabric. If you were an artist and you were painting a canvas, think of this as the stretcher board. It consists of two pieces, an inner and an outer hoop. You never have to unscrew this completely. You just have to loosen it. And the way we're going to use the hoop is you take your piece of fabric. This actually already has a little embroidery on it. You're going to lay the hoop down without the screw. Put your fabric on top. And for now, you'll just be putting the hoop where you plan on working. So if you're working on a piece of fabric, you'll put it in the middle of the fabric. If you're sewing a t-shirt, you'll put the hoop where you want your design to be. So I loosen up my hoop a little bit. I press it down, and now I start to tighten it. Now, I'm going to give you a specific instruction now just for woven fabric, meaning this, and then I will show you an example of a t-shirt. For a woven fabric, I want this so tight, it sounds like a drum. Because what it's going to do is it's going to make my stitching easier. So as I screw, I pull and tighten. And it should be pretty tight that you can hear it. However, if I were to do a t-shirt, which I have now here, and this is when we at Craft Jam used to teach in the studio, we'd have all these little icons, go get it, and that's where this all comes from. And so you can stitch all over it, just little emojis, eyeglasses, hello, words, monograms. But for a t-shirt, if I stretched my t-shirt as tight as I stretch my woven, when I take my hoop off, the fabric will bounce back and my stitches won't lay flat. So for those of anybody who's using a t-shirt, I'll show you the proper tension. So it's still the same. You put your hoop. You then find your place. And here, you're not going to tighten it. You're going to have it so that it's just in, but you have give. So that when I take the hoop off, it won't spring back into place and my stitches will lay flat. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. Okay, great. So hoop is number one important. However, I've been in many countries, in Mexico in particular, and China, they don't stitch with a hoop. They do it freehand. And I'm always amazed because it really, they're incredibly talented. You might have a transfer pen. The transfer pens, these you can buy at Michael's, but any pen or pencil will do. If you're using something though, and you're going to wash it, the ink may run, so be careful. Or maybe a Sharpie won't wash out, but be careful with what you use, or will you just cover the whole outline and then you won't have a problem. But if you use something that runs, the color will run, and I'll show you, I'll explain to you what that means. So they sell these pens. Some of them are disappearing, some of them come off with water, some of them come off with heat. So if you enjoy embroidery, you might want to invest in one of these. They're only a few dollars. They come in different types. This is a friction pen. This one is actually erasable. But another way to transfer designs, and this is what we at Craft Jam use, and it's quite a good product. It's called Solvi. And what it is you can put it through a printer. So if you can't draw or you're not an artist, we usually send people emojis. And then these are stickers that literally will peel off. I could stick on my garment, stitch right through it, and then this comes off with water. So this also is a good product to use. But I think you guys just have, like you're going to trace your patterns. But if I were to use this, as you can see with all these other emojis, I would just stick this on and stitch right through it. So this is another option. Once I was finished stitching, this would rinse right off. But there's a disadvantage to this in that it gets, do you need a screwdriver for the hoop? No, you shouldn't. If it's very tight, maybe a plier to loosen it up, but your screwdriver, your hoop should loosen pretty easily. So if it doesn't help, maybe a plier, or let Craft Jam know that you got a defective hoop and I apologize, and maybe you can stitch without the hoop. You found holding the nut help, great. Could I tape the piece of paper or vellum down to transfer the pattern? Yes, absolutely. And I'll show you, since I know you don't have Sulky, I'll show you a different method that's a very old-fashioned method that's terrific. One of the other methods you can do is just simply, if your fabric is see-through, you can just simply trace right through it. So if I wanted to trace, let's see, where's my emojis? So here are the emoji sheets that we normally get. You can put your fabric down, and with any kind of pen or pencil, just trace right around it. And it'll be the same thing. So since it's raining everywhere, let's just trace the umbrella. So if you have see-through fabric, this could be a good option for you. If you do not have see-through fabric, I'll tell you another option. There's something called pricking and pouncing. It's a very, very old-fashioned method. It's done when you study in proper embroidery. This is how you learn. But you have to have some of the right equipment. If you have baby talcum powder or baby powder, it might work. So say I wanted to embroider this umbrella. I would do what's called pricking. I would probably put a towel or some sort of fabric underneath my motif. And I would make little pricks all along the design, like this. Once you've pricked the whole design, you then can go over with chalk. When you pick it up, I actually have prick and pounce in my closet. If you want, I can run and actually demonstrate this technique if you want, or do you think that you understand it? Would you like me to run and get it and show it, or it's understandable? Somebody unmute.
It's understandable.
Oh, okay, cool. So
Oh,
yeah,
somebody else said, yes, please.
I'm gonna go get it. It's my closet's right there. So it is very interesting method. So talk amongst yourselves. Sorry, I thought I had it somewhere conveniently located, but of course I do not. So I will do my best to demonstrate it with, what do I have? All right, I'll emulate it and with a pencil and maybe we can go through it. So sorry for that. I will prick the whole thing. And then trying to see if I have like some sort of a powder. Of course, when you want something, you don't have it conveniently located. Could have sworn I had. All right. What I would do then is if these holes were big enough, you can do like this with your pen, and wherever there's a hole, it would transfer. And then you would just join your lines. So if you had talcum powder or Taylor's chalk, you would be able to do this. I could have sworn my Pounce powder was close by, but I think I packed it because I'm teaching a workshop out of the city and it might be there. Another way to transfer a pattern is with carbon paper. Carbon paper, not the ones that you use from Office Depot, although, oh, you can't unloosen it. You can't unloosen it yet? Diamond. Do you have a plier, or do you have a different hoop? Did you get more than one hoop? Yeah.
I'm using this thing.
The ply, and it's not unscrewing. It's not letting you unscrew the hoop.
Yeah, but maybe like I think there's like a tool that this fits in, so maybe that would work, like that thing.
Let me pin you so I can
I don't
see.
know. Maybe it's a screwdriver. No, the other one.
You
I don't know
can't,
what it
you
is.
can't pop it out,
No, there's no way.
and that screw, and you tried the plier, you tried to unscrew that screw.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably just a defective hoop, and I apologize. So we're gonna stitch with you without a hoop, and you can do it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Like I said, some people do stitch without hoops, but yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'll let Craft Jam know, and you know. Okay. Anyway, it's this. Well, it wouldn't be COVID if we weren't having problems, right? Well, one of the other things you can do is use carbon paper. If this brand is called Clover. If you use the type that you use like from Staples, it's really inky and it would probably stain your fabric. I made the mistake of doing it once, so I really don't do it anymore. But if I did have carbon paper, I would lay my design on top. I would put my fabric down, carbon ink side down, design on top, and with a sharp pen, I would go around and press very hard, and the design would transfer onto the pattern. So I don't know, is everybody gonna have designs in mind? Do you think you could freehand draw them on your garments? Because I've shown you the techniques of transferring. So you can see here quite faint, the umbrella was there if I pressed even harder. You're on Photoshop trying to figure out. Yeah, Pinterest is a great place. Tracing it off your phone. If you have a motif, you can lay your fabric down on your phone and trace it onto your fabric that way. You might want to just do shapes or write your name just to start, something. I'll show you another technique that's become quite popular and could be a good idea also, is this whole idea of visual mending. So you drew assignment in design. Great. So, people right now are like loving their garments and adding embellishments to them. So I've been really focused on doing now, it's sort of my thing, working on visual mending. Is my phone frozen now? So that's something else we can do. Or in this case, I used some sashiko Japanese designs on a work shirt, and I added just some design here on top of the pocket. And I added some motifs on the back. So think about things like this. It doesn't have to be a picture. It could be a geometric. It could be a rainbow. It could be, spell out your name, a date. So, it's our first time. We're here to have fun. We're here to learn the basics. And now we're going to finally get stitching. So let's talk about the different threads and items you can use. What most of you are using, I'm assuming, is DMC or some type of 6-stranded floss. It's a wonderful product. It's very inexpensive. It's made in France. And the reason that they call it 6 strands is because literally you could separate and have 6 strands. So it would be like as if you were deciding whether to use a Sharpie or a fine pencil. So this is showing you 6 strands, 5 strands, 4 strands, 3, 2, 1. When you stitch, I want you to always use a piece of thread from your fingertip to your elbow. Your inclination is going to want to be to use a really long piece of thread. I don't want you to do that for a few reasons. 1, your arm's going to get tired. 2, well, in the old days when you were sitting next to someone, you might have punched someone. But what makes a beautiful embroidery is that the threads are nice and smooth and fine. If you have a super long piece, just like if you were filing your fingernails, the thread would get pilled. So you want to make sure that your thread is not going through that fabric like 3,000 times, because each time it does go through the fabric, it's going to do like a 1/4 inch twist. So every so often, I'll also just hang my hoop upside down and let the thread unfold. The other reason is like short hair and long hair. Short hair gets tangled less than long hair. Long threads will tangle, they will not, and you'll be unhappy. So this, you can get this 6-stranded thread in solid colors like this, but this is also a variegated color, which is nice to use. It shades from like pink to blue to purple. So these are options if you're using this. Now, I'm going to show you, I've made every mistake there is to make. This is what happens when you use like friendship bracelet thread that's not color fast, it runs. So you're going to spend all this time doing an embroidery. You're going to walk out into the rain and it's going to look like you made a tie-dyed embroidery, which may be lovely, but it's not what we wanted. So whatever floss you buy, just make sure it's color fast. It should say. DMC and Anchor are two brands from France. They're color fast and they're consistent. One of the things you'll notice is one side has the name of the company and the other side is a bigger sticker and it has the number. What that's telling you is a few things. It's giving you the die lot. So if you did this beautiful embroidery and ran out of thread, and you weren't in your home city, you were in LA, or you were in New York, or you were in Canada, you know that 4215 will be consistent no matter where in the world you buy it. So it's your die lot. And if you love a color, mark it down. But not only is it your die lot, on DMC thread, it's the side that you pull it from. If you try to pull your thread from this side, it'll the wrong side, it'll knot up. So whatever thread you're using, figure out which is the side to pull it. And then, as I said, you're going to pull from fingertip to elbow. But there's different other threads you can use. You can use Appleton crewel wool, which is a very traditional English embroidery yarn. I've made some really nice totes out of this. It's fuzzy. It's a single ply. It's expensive and it's not that easy to find. And there's something else called pearl, which is really good for small florals. It's not applied thread, so you don't have to separate it and make any decisions. But anything you buy, the big thing is make sure it's color fast. When you make these decisions of 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you can also blend colors the same way you would blend paint. So I might say I'm going to take 3 strands of orange and 2 strands of blue and mix my own color. So it's a way to mix colors. But for now, we're just going to get started on how to thread your needle, etc. So I assume you all got needles. I don't know, did you get needle threaders in your kits? Do you have, yes? Perfect. Okay, because that's always a little bugaboo for people. So first I'm going to teach you without a needle threader, and then I'll teach you with a needle threader. So there are some tricks because sometimes we don't always have a needle threader. So if I'm going to use all 6 ply, I take my thread and I wrap my thread around the tip of the needle. It's almost like counterintuitive. You almost want to hide that pinch. But then what you can do is you'll see if you just kind of squeeze it through, you can get, so that could take a little practice. So that's one way. But the needle threader is really the game changer. And how do you use a needle threader? You have a needle threader that probably looks something like this. These aren't the sturdiest, so you need to be a little bit careful. I use, if the thread is thicker, I use what's called the Tapestry needle threader, and I'll show that to you later. You're going to put your needle on here. So now you have a rather large hole to put your thread through. And now you're going to take your thread and put it through maybe just 2 inches. So you have your needle first against the base, you have your thread through the hole, and now you're just going to pull, and you see I just broke this needle threader. So you have to really hold on. You pull, and then your thread is attached. I happen to like this needle threader. It's called a Tapestry needle threader. It won't break, and I'll show you. But you can't use it on a very thin needle. But you see how with the first pull, I already broke this plastic one. With this one, they're metal. It's virtually impossible to break them. So I do the same thing, put my needle, and if I have a really big hole, I can do that. Put my thread through. and pull, and you can see nothing broke. So that's how we use the needle threaders. Any questions on that? Is the part of unravel already loose? Is the part of unravel already loose from the band? I don't understand the question. You want to unmute yourself?
Sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I took my note, there was one piece on one end that was dangling. And I couldn't see a loose piece on the other.
Oh, okay. As long as you can pull it and it doesn't knot. Sometimes it's really, what brand of thread are you guys using? Do you know? Does it have a name? Does it say DMC on it?
No,
Oh, okay, that's why. Okay, so then you're dealing with a different thread, so it won't, you're just gonna have to find the one end, and you don't have two labels, so that shouldn't be a problem.
okay.
I happen to, for needles, I like a chenille needle. When you're embroidering on fabric, you want, because needles come in so many different types, as I will show you here. All these are needles for different purposes. I personally like what's called the chenille needle because I think the eye is big enough. I think it's a size 24 chenille. You want something that says sharp. Some needles will be blunt, like this one. This is for tapestry. It's for like needlepoint or cross stitch, where you're not breaking through the fabric. So like when you do a cross stitch, there are specific holes so you don't have to pierce the fabric. So I think though, you know, if you were putting beads on something, this is a beading needle. So you need to pick a needle for the fabric. So if I was working on silk, I would never use a thick needle. If I was working on, I would use a thin needle because your needle is going to make a hole in the fabric. But a thin needle wouldn't go through canvas. It wouldn't go through denim. So it's kind of use your best judgment. I mean, it would be obvious that a thin needle would break. They don't often say like, especially for this. So my recommendation as a generally great needle, first of all, John James is a really good company. They're from Britain. They're not, I don't know that they're that easy to find here. I mean, I have a lot of supplies from the UK because I'm studying there. DMC makes great needles also. But I think if you just buy sort of Clover has like an embroidery packet of needles. But from my personal taste, chenille number 24. For today's class to start with, while we learn, we're going to use all 6 ply. Oh, you have blunt ones? All right, it doesn't matter. If the blunt will be a problem if you try to stitch on a t-shirt. But the blunt, you'll be able to stitch through a fabric. It's not that they're so blunt, it's just that a sharp needle will go through the fabric a little bit easier. But there's always a solution. You know, we always can find a solution to everything. I use blunt needles on denim even. I would probably not use blunt on a t-shirt because it might not go through, and I wouldn't use blunt on silk. On something that's very fine, you don't want to do blunt because you'd almost be forcing it. But for today's purposes, blunts are fine. I've been known to use them. And if you do cross stitch, they're really great. So now I'm going to move my camera to my canvas because we're finally going to start to stitch in a minute. So what I want you to do is you're going to work with 6 ply for now, 1 color. We're going to leave a tail and at the end furthest from the needle. So I'm a righty. I have the needle in my right hand. In my left hand, I'm holding the other end of the thread. You want to make a knot, just like a basic knot on that end. You don't knot your needle to the thread because then you wouldn't be able to get your needle through. But you're going to make a knot because we're going to bring our needle up from the bottom of our canvas, which I will twist here. So now we're finally going to sew. Yay, what we're here to do. So the first stitch we're going to learn, and it is the most basic of stitches. It's the running stitch. And you literally could do this one stitch alone and have plenty of beautiful embroideries. And I'll show you afterwards some of my work to show you that with just one basic stitch, your embroidery is still perfect. Could I use it on jeans? The blunt needle, you might have to push a little, but I think you can. I think you'll be able to. So while you guys are kind of trying to like decide on your designs, are we ready, do you think? Do we knot the beginning of the yarn as well? No, you only knot the end that's furthest from the needle, because I'm gonna bring my needle up from the back. And if I don't knot it, it would just keep going. So the knot stops it from moving any further. So let me just, if I cut this knot off. So if I didn't knot, so this needle end is free with a little tail. This one has no knot. If I had no knot, and there is a way that you do stitch where you leave a tail, but you have to go back and weave it in. But if I don't have a knot and I pull, it's just going to come out. So you either need to leave a tail or make a knot to stop the fabric, the thread from coming through on your first stitch. So let's start stitching, and then we'll start asking, do we knot the, so is that clear about which end gets knotted? And that, because I know the instinct is to knot the needle, but if you put a knot on the needle, your needle will come through the fabric and nothing else. So that's why we knot the other end. So to do the running stitch, basically, embroidery is really bringing the needle up at point A and down at point B. And we're going to learn different ways to do that. So I'm going to bring my needle up at point A, and it stops because the knot is holding it in place. And then I'm going to bring it down. And this is a determined length. So right now I'm just doing sort of a 1/4 of an inch stitch and a 1/4 of an inch space. So I bring my needle up and I bring it down at point B. The knot will prevent it from moving. I take a space. I now bring my needle up at point C and down at D. So you're bringing your needle up, down, skipping a space, bringing it up and down. So why don't we just do that? And I'm going to stay quiet because there's something very, very beautiful about the sound of embroidery. Somebody said, one of my students said, it's the heartbeat of the design. And I think that's true. It's what makes embroidery really peaceful. So everybody just kind of get comfortable with the needle. Now, one of the things I'm going to tell you you need to watch out for is if I don't pay attention and I try to stitch now, I'm going to have 12 ply. So you constantly want to make sure that your tail is moving up along with you. Sometimes I've been watching like a good TV show and I forget, and all of a sudden I end up like that with double what I wanted. So is the running stitch clear? Because I'm going to show you how to finish it off, and then we're going to move on to the next stitch. Any questions before I move on?
No, it's clear.
Okay, great. So now I'm going to do my last stitch. And now how do I finish it? I can't just leave it, because if I wash my garment, it'll end up going out. So I'm going to turn my fabric over. And as you can see, you have your dashed lines. What you're going to do is I tend to turn my needle to the dull side so I don't cut myself. And then I'm just going to weave it in and out of the stitches that are already in the back. See here, I just have to move my tail. So I'm going to go under, over. So you're just weaving in a few times. And then maybe for the fourth time, you might want to leave a circle like this. And then just bring your thread inside of it. Even this isn't really necessary. And that knots it. But if you want me to demonstrate it, think of this as the equator. I'm going to bring my needle to the northern hemisphere. I'm going to bring it down to the southern hemisphere, go into the underneath the equator, up inside this bubble and pull. And now I can safely cut this, and my garment or embroidery, when I wash it, won't unravel. So that's the running stitch. And the running stitch is really the jumping off point for every stitch. I had a student say, well, I don't like that stitch. It's like, well, tough, you have to learn it. It's like saying, I don't want to learn ABC. I don't like those letters. They're all a process. So one of my favorite stitches, it doesn't always have to run this way. It's used a lot in quilting and in, show you these embroideries that I did, this mending and sashiko. The running stitch is used, these are all sachets, and I wish you could smell them. They're lavender. This is all the running stitch. So you can see with even a running stitch, you can still have a very lovely embroidery, and they smell divine. The smell of lavender right now is rather overwhelming. So now we're going to move on to the back stitch. The back stitch is an outline stitch. So pretty much any embroidery you'll do, you'll need to know these two stitches, and then we'll talk about the satin stitch. They're all stitches that will build a very nice library. And you can do florals, you can do monograms, you can do anything. We start the running stitch the same way we do the back stitch. The back stitch the same way we start the running stitch. I'm going to bring my needle up at A again. I'm going to bring it down at B. Now here, I'm going to pretend like I'm doing my running stitch. I'm going forward. And the thing about embroidery is it's really literal. Running is like you're running forward. The back stitch, you're sure to be going back at some point. So now that I brought my stitch here, instead of going forward to the right, like I would with my running stitch, I'm going to put my needle back into the same hole. Let me drop my camera a little so you can see it. Okay, here we go. So I'm putting my needle back into the hole where it came from. And now I'm going to go forward like I'm doing the running stitch. And I'm going to go back into the hole. So you're making now a solid line. So this would be good for outlining anything, any flower, any, if you were doing an architectural, you could outline a building, you can do a person's name, you can do amazing Pinterest images. So it's quite simple. As you can see, it's very repetitive. You're coming up. And just make sure, like here, I'm working with two hands, so. And every so often, as I mentioned, I'm gonna untwirl I'm gonna make sure my thread is laying nice and flat. And also that I'm moving my tail up. I'm just gonna cut off. Sometimes you might get a little knot. If you get a knot, you try to undo it. If you can't undo it, you just cut it off and pick up where you left off. Embroidery is pretty forgiving. Okay, so just get comfortable with our back stitch. And we've talked about outlines, but sometimes life isn't an outline. We need to fill shapes in. So the next stitch I'm going to teach you is the satin stitch, which is basically back stitches, but they're put right next to each other. And we're going to fill in the circle that I have. I just have to move this little chat box. So I have a circle drawn here. We're going to fill that in. And I'm going to talk to you about best ways to do the satin stitch. So, and if anybody wants to pop in the chat what designs they plan on doing, or whether you're just here to learn stitches, I can teach as many stitches as you like and as quick paced as, we all want. This is your class, so will make it specific to you.
Hi, Robin. For the back stitch, are you going into the last stitch again?
Yes, and you try to get it into the exact hole, because
Okay,
if you don't, it's not a disaster, but here I'll purposely miss like one ply. It just means that the line is not as consistent. It's a little broken up and you will see a little bit of a white space. So you're really trying, and that's where a dull needle might help you, because the dull needle will make the bigger hole and you'll be able to really find it. A sharp needle will shrink that hole. So maybe, you know, dull needles, if your fabric is thin enough, might be the perfect thing. So it's, again, just getting used to the rhythm, getting comfortable with the thread. The other thing is, if you do cut yourself by accident and you bleed on your own fabric, your own saliva will take out the blood. There's an enzyme we all have in our saliva. That's because I bled on numerous pieces and found that as long as I didn't have coffee or anything in my mouth and I rinsed my mouth out, it does in fact work. Just like before, we're going to finish it off by weaving it through and through a few times. And then we'll talk about filling in shapes. So if you want to draw a circle or a heart, if you're practicing, you can do that to get ready for the next stitch. The other thing I'll say is, you know, during the pandemic, I've been stitching a lot on a Zoom with people from all over the world. So for 2 years, I've never met these people in real person, in real life. I've only met them on Zoom. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot of things because every stitcher has a different tradition or learned differently from, you know, whomever taught you. Or so there's quite a few interesting tips. When I used to do the satin stitch, which is a stitch that you use to fill shapes in, I normally would work it the way I read. I start from here and I would work my stitch from left to right, unless you're Hebrew and you're doing it the reverse. But for us Americans right now, we usually we read that way. However, when you're doing a satin stitch, you want to have like a really nice perpendicular. If I started here, little by little, my needle's just going to slightly start tipping off. So in order to get a perfectly straight and nice smooth shape, I've now been taught to start from the center of the shape, work left or right, and then come back to center. And that's a really effective tool. I'll give you my number at the end of the class. If anybody has any specific questions, you can just text me. I'm always, I can't tell you how many people have texted me. There's never a question that I feel is, you know, unreasonable. And I love hearing from people. So certainly I am available. YouTube is a good, if it's the middle of the night, you don't want to call me, you can go to YouTube. My Instagram is the Hoop NYC. You can contact me there. But there's so many resources. And if you also go to the DMC website, the thread, you can get free patterns downloaded. So you don't have to buy kits. You know, it's nice to support artisans, but with inflation the way it is, it's nice to support our own selves in our own pockets. So don't let the fact that maybe you can't buy a kit. DMC, you can Google them and they're themed. You can say, is there a way to easily access the back when doing a shirt? You mean like a t-shirt or a button-down shirt, or you mean to get inside? I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, I'm doing like a turtleneck shirt
Uh-huh.
and I just have trouble like getting the back. Going in and
Getting,
out.
are you doing the neck or the body? Did you put
The body.
well, it shouldn't be because it's like on a t-shirt. What I would do if I was doing the t-shirt, if you're working with a hoop, and even if you're not, if I was to do my design here, I would just stick my needle in here. And I would just start stitching. So, and then when I was ready to go to the back, I would just turn my garment like that.
Okay, thank you.
Is that clear? Yeah. Garments, t-shirts and sweatshirts are easier. It's when you're doing a pant leg that's really hard because you've got to get your hand into a kind of a small space. So that becomes a little challenging. Or if you're doing a sleeve, I once made the mistake of doing a pant leg, a skinny jean, and it was miserable. I had to stick my hand in the skinny little place and then turn it inside out. So what some people do now, and it makes sense, is they'll literally open the side seam of a jean. So if I wanted to, this is a shirt. So even here on this shirt, when I wanted to access it, I just turned it over and went in and knotted my things. But if I was doing an embroidery, say on the side seam of a jean, so imagine this is a skinny jean. People are actually opening up the side seam like maybe 3 or 4 inches so that their hand can go in. And then if you have a sewing machine, you just stitch it closed again. But that's rather advanced. But that is an option. It's probably easiest to just stitch it in an area that's easily accessible. For the circle, again, I'm going to knot one end. And I am going to, you're going to be doing basically a series of straight lines, one next to each other. Thank you, everybody. So here, I'm going to bring my needle up here at the top. And you want this to look like satin. And now I'm going to use my finger, make like that would look not so straight. I'm going to really like say, okay, does that look perpendicular? And now I'm going to put my needle down. And that's my first satin stitch. I'm now going to come right back to the top, and as close to that stitch as I can get, I'm going to pull it up. I'm going to lay it down. And you're just going to, as you work towards the side of the circle, of course, your stitches are going to get shorter because the circumference, or is it the radius? I never remember, is shorter. And if you decide that you maybe left too much of a space, like say here, I left a bit too much of a space, there's 2 options. I could rip it out, very easy. And again, ripping out, this is the beauty of embroidery. If you see a stitch you don't like, take it out. It'll bother you. You might have 10,000 beautiful stitches and 1 bad one. Your eye will always go to the bad one. So I often will take out my bad stitches and start over again. But I think, hand embroidery, it's a slow process. People ask, why do these ball gowns, these red carpet gowns cost $20,000 or wedding gowns? They're hand embroidered, they're hand beaded. I mean, it could take an hour to do a circle. So imagine doing a whole ball gown. So you can see how I'm slowly, and you'll also notice that I'll stab my needle a few times. I don't always hit it right at the same point. So I usually feel around when it looks right to me. Now, I'm going to give you another pointer about this. Say I wanted to do a gigantic circle. You couldn't use this technique. These are called floats. And anybody who wears jewelry or has long fingernails or a hangnail knows or watch that you could possibly, if these, what they call floats, are too long, you will snag them. So there's something that you can do to avoid that. So now that I've stitched halfway, I'm going to come back to my center and I'm going to need more thread. So let me just show you. Maybe I'll do it in a different color. Oh, and you could see I actually made a mistake. I didn't pull this thread strong enough. I had a knot in it. So see, even I make mistakes. So I would pull that out and cut it. And then just rethread it. Like, don't let any mistake you make rattle you. You know, it's only embroidery. I was pretty stressed out about some silly thing. And it's like, you know what, in the scheme of things, so here I've just rethreaded my needle. I would pass it underneath and then start again on the other side. But there are some cases where you might want to do some lettering. So for instance, the letter L or a certain shape. But L is a good example. If I were to do the satin stitch, here would be perfect, short, short, short. But here I would have these huge long floats, and that wouldn't be great. Like even if you were, like, say this was a house, you wanted to embroider a house. What you need to do is work on the diagonal so that no stitches are ever very long. And it's quite attractive. I did a whole mantra lettered and I did it all on the diagonal. So now all my stitches will be this way. So I'm never too long. So if you find you're having a letter or something, and I'll show you how to stitch on the diagonal, know that this is an option. So how's everybody doing? Stitching, enjoying it, relaxing?
It's really relaxing to watch you do it.
And it'll be relaxing to do it. I'm loving this Ashiko. I taught this class last night. So I highly recommend keep looking into that. I'm gonna see if Craft Jam will offer a mending class. I think it's really on point right now. And embroidery is also great. Like if you ever stain anything, if you have like a white shirt and you love it, just embroider a little heart or something over it. I always look at, like, having been in the garment center, you can buy a t-shirt at Target for $2, $3, $5. As soon as you put an embroidery on it, you go to Anthropology, it's now $45. So great house gifts, napkins. So if I were to do this letter L, I will just stitch the whole thing diagonal. Just have to be careful that you're coming right next to the other one, but it'll still give you the same effect and you won't have any trouble with anything. Or like if you do the laundry and your bra hooks onto something and pulls it. So this is something I learned when I was. Another thing I learned that's quite helpful with transferring patterns is there's something called freezer paper, Reynolds freezer paper. So while I showed you this stuff called sulky that you have to buy, you could actually make your own. And the way you make your own sulky, which means you'd be able to put your fabric through a printer. So if you had an image, you had a photograph that you loved, or you had a drawing of Snoopy or a character, you would take your fabric, cut it 8.5 by 11. Cut your freezer paper 8.5 by 11. There's a shiny side to freezer paper and a dull side to freezer paper. You'll take your shiny side next to the fabric. I'm just trying to see if I have any freezer paper nearby that I can show you. So I would cut my fabric 8.5 by 11, take my freezer paper, shiny side, iron the two together. You could then put that through your printer. And the print will print onto your fabric and you just peel away the freezer paper. It's the most ingenious hack ever. I did something, this mantra that I'm showing you how I stitched, it was so complicated. It would have been so difficult to trace. I fed it right through my printer and everything was there and covered it all up so I didn't have to worry about it running. And that's the diagonal satin stitch. Any questions there?
Okay, so you printed on the freezer paper
No, you take your freezer paper. I really wish I would have had this done for you guys because it's really amazing. So I say this is freezer paper,
Mhm.
right? And I cut my fabric 8.5 by 11. So this is the shiny side of the freezer paper. I lay my fabric down, I iron it. Now these two are bonded, which means now this fabric can go through my printer. I couldn't put just the fabric through the printer. It doesn't have a backing. Some people have bought stickers, 8.5 by 11 stickers. It just needs a stiffener to get it through. In my printer, then I put it face down. And as it's coming through, it's printing on your fabric. Since this doesn't stick, it's just kind of heat bonded. You then pull it apart. And now you have the design on your fabric.
Okay.
I could do a little demo and email it to you guys. I'll do that.
I think I know what you mean.
Yeah, but you could probably even look it up on YouTube. It's genius. It's a really, really good way to transfer patterns. If you don't have, it's the same thing like with this sulky. I transferred, I put the sticky paper, so you can use a sticker and fabric. Same thing. It's just stickers are much more expensive than freezer paper. Freezer paper is really cheap. But these designs, how will you stitch it? Oh, these are the sashiko designs. So this is what's visual mending. So you'll do, I did all different sachets, but it's also a way to repair jeans. So for on my denim, and you'll see if you shop Japanese denim, you'll often see these patterns. And you can see how the knots are on top. The thing about mending is you embrace the imperfections. That's why I love it. I love embroidery. Not everything has to be perfect. I think perfection stops people. I think you need to, in order to learn, you need to make mistakes. I did these patterns. I did this using that sticker paper. So I printed this design on this. I stuck it on. I rinsed it off and I had a design. I didn't have to draw. If I had to sit there and draw all this, probably wouldn't have been, it would have been time consuming. I can't see through the fabric. But there's a downside to the sticky stuff has a downside. Your needle gets sticky, the thread sometimes gets corrupted. But it is.
I've got a quick question for you, Robin. It's
Yeah.
for Jessie. So she's drawn this really pretty heart picture, and I'll share it in the chat. I think she shared it, but you have to download it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But it's just a heart with like
Oh,
a
okay.
heart and then kind of with like flames going through in the middle.
Yep.
She's just wondering like how to start and what stitch you would recommend
Okay,
using.
perfect. So I'm gonna draw a heart. Thank you for monitoring the chat. That helps because sometimes I miss it. So if I'm not answering a question, are the flames coming off the top here, sort of like this?
No, it's going through the middle.
Through the middle. You want to, why don't you pin, let me see the design if you can pin it. Yeah.
Okay, here, I'll share my screen really quickly.
Thank you. Yeah, if anybody has any designs, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, can you see that?
Oh, yeah, okay. Let me just, okay, so 2 questions. Do you want the flames filled in one color, or do you want it all to be an outline?
Yes, I want the flames in one color and also the heart in another color.
Okay, perfect. Now I will exactly show you. And anybody else who has the same question, just start, showing me your design. So I know that's not exactly your design, but I will show you what I would do. I would start down here with my satin stitch in the middle. Thread my needle. And I would use I'll use blue for the bottom because that's what I have handy. I would stitch again from the center, left and right, but I would finish my first color. So I'll try to just do this pretty quickly. So I'll start here because this looks about like the center of my heart, even though it's not. Let's pretend it is. And I'll follow the line. So see where your flame comes down here lower, your stitch is going to be lower. So you're just going to follow that outline. Here I'm going to come up high because my flame is high. So just follow the lines, your top and bottom line. And now I'm going to just do a few more, and then I'm going to come in with the top color so you can see how it's almost kind of like doing a back stitch into the same hole. Let me just do a little bit more. You know, it's interesting because there are so many ways to approach a design. You can approach it, well, I want it to be an outline. You can approach it, I want it to be filled in. And those are the wonderful decisions you make, creative decisions you make. Okay, now I'm going to change the colors. And I'll use a pink so you can really see the contrast. I'm gonna, again, I would start from the center. You know, I'll make my knot the way I always do, and I'll start here. And now I'll just see where does this thread line up. So that one will line up there. Then next to it, you're just going to start filling it in. So that would be my suggestion. Do your flames first, all the way across, up and down, and then go in and fill in your heart color. And like the back stitch, if there's a hole for that, you could decide you can work the reverse. You can work the top and then work the bottom. You can work the bottom and work the top. Or you could have just outlined the stitch. Now, if I were just going to outline the stitch, I might just do a back stitch. So different approaches, different looks. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. It's a very pretty design.
Thank you.
And-
Tina,
oh, sorry, Robin.
I want to look at your JPEG. Let's see. Should this?
Yeah, that's the narwhal.
Let me. Oh, wow, that's fabulous. Okay. Ooh, that's a toughie. That's a big one to do, even on the diagonal. Let me think about this one. You'd be great with the spout. It's the big part of, okay, so let me draw that puppy a little bit. Let me just kind of get the shape and I'll tell you what I think you should do. Keep those images coming, ladies. They help. They help me help you. So I know this doesn't look quite like what yours is, but it's good enough that this shape, let me get rid of this little narwhal. This little cutie. So what would I do? There's a stitch called the long and short. It's a bit complicated. You can do that, or maybe I had a rainbow that I showed you in the beginning. Oh, okay, here. So you see this orange? I filled this in, and this is a rather large section. But you see how it looks rough? That's called the split stitch. So potentially you can do this stitch and just, you're going up and down. I'll show you the stitch in a solid line, and then I'll show it to you because this won't snag. There's no place to snag. And a narwhal shouldn't be maybe so smooth. Maybe it should be a little bumpy. So first I'll demonstrate this, the long and short stitch, and then I'll demonstrate it as a split stitch if you wanted to fill it in, because even a diagonal will really be too long. So what you're going to do is you're going to almost be doing stitches like this, and they're going to stagger. So there's going to be a long one and a short one and a long one and a short one and a long one and a short one. Your next row, where there's a short, this becomes a long. So you're just staggering your stitches. It's a bit confusing to describe, so I'll just demonstrate, and hopefully you'll see what I mean. Let's see, where's my needle? Bring this up here. Or you could make a stripe narwhal. Yeah, do they exist?
We can do anything.
I you know, you're an amazing group, because I usually have classes where I'm the only one talking, and I hate that. I love interacting. So thank you for not like making me teach to a blank screen and not making me feel like I'm talking to myself. So I do enjoy the questions when they come. It helps me, and it helps you, and it helps us all have a more fun experience. So. And it should be relaxing. And I've had a little bit of stress. I don't know if you know anything about Manhattan real estate, but the prices of New York real estate are crazy. And I rented an apartment pre-COVID, and they are now raising my rent an absurd amount, to the point where I have to move out. So I just keep stitching, because I'm so bloody stressed out. Oh, it's crazy. They are raising my rent $750. Can you imagine? I can't stay. So that's why I have so many of these lavender sachets, because I have been kept calm by stitching.
I
Yes,
understand. I know rent in the city is also like crazy, and I appreciate lavender too.
it is so crazy. Yes, sadly, they can do it because this isn't a rent stabilized. They used to have a thing called rent stabilization, and there's still rent stabilized apartments, not that many though. And rent stabilized means they can only raise you 3 or 5%. But because of COVID, all the rents dropped last year. And now that the city's coming back to life, they can do whatever they want. I cannot tell you, some people, I was raised 14%, some people were raised 30%. This apartment was already stupidly expensive, but I just had no choice. So now I have to move again. And so here, this is the long and short. So the long and short of it is just stitch when you're stressed and sniff lavender, and then do the long and short stitch. But I volunteer on Thursday morning. So I was in my volunteer job, and I was getting all these, because I'm trying to now buy an apartment, which is a whole other issue and not easy.
And
But
that's the thing, they raise the rent, but somebody else will rent there, right?
yeah, well, you know, that's the problem with New York. Although I think they're getting so much pushback because so many people are furious, and everybody wants to move out now. And you know, they don't want to have an empty building. It still takes time to re-rent apartments. But
Yeah.
I'm retired, and luckily I had a successful career. But the problem with, you know, you're told to work hard your whole life so that you can retire, but no one will give you a mortgage if you have no income.
Yeah.
So I found an apartment I loved. I thought I could get a mortgage approved, and just before I found out I can't. And so I feel like I'm just constantly going to be at somebody's mercy. But anyway, those are, I think about the Ukrainian people. I think about people who are homeless. So I just feel like I can't complain. I can just stitch. So you see how I'm staggering my stitches long and short? Maybe.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I want you to do for the narwhal. And then on my next row, I need to move this away a little bit. I'll tell you, my company in New York is an in-person embroidery company. And so I'm starting to do in-person events again. I did one last night, the mending one. And it's so nice. I really miss having people. Like, I would have loved to have been able to like sit right next to you and do the narwhal with you. And there's people coming from the richer part. Wow, yeah, it's crazy. I'm ready. I'm looking for dual citizenship. I might move to Mexico. I could live cheaper. Okay, so that's my first row. My second row now, I'll just come down and tuck my stitches into the shorter ones. So now my second row, really, all my stitches are the same. They're just staggered because they're going into the stitch above. So you can do that. That's one thing. Or you can work a chain stitch, almost like I showed you that rainbow in the very beginning of the class. You can work a chain stitch round and round. Let's see if I can find that. Or if I filled anything in here. Here. Okay, so if you like, this stitch could potentially work. And you can do the chain stitch, but work it around and around and around. You want to learn this one?
Yeah.
We have time. We're good.
Yeah, I want to learn that.
Yeah, okay. So that I love the chain stitch. People either love it or hate it. For me, it's one of my favorite stitches. It is worked directionally, like not all stitches work in a specific direction. This one does. So I'm going to work it actually from, I'm going to draw a line from the bottom up. Most of the stitches you can go back and forth and back and forth. The chain stitch has to be done in a certain direction. So for instance, and you only really have to measure your first row and then you just match your stitches. So the chain stitch is a beautiful stitch for that. But you have to like the stitch. So I would do the first row. I wouldn't then come back and go like, I wouldn't go right, left, right. I would do this, finish it, come back, because you want all your chains going in the same direction. And think of the chain stitch like you would a necklace, a link. If you break a link, the necklace will break, the chain will break. So to start the chain stitch, and actually I probably need a longest, I'm going to use a longer piece of thread. So how's everybody enjoying embroidery?
I'm enjoying it.
Isn't it? Yeah.
My mom used to do this a lot when I was younger.
Oh, it's so wonderful. I can't tell you how many people will say that to me. I get two types of phone calls. Oh, I want to learn to embroider because my grandma did, or my grandma just passed away. I don't embroider and I have all her embroidery supplies. Do you want them? And it's always a resounding yes, because the treasures that you find in grandma's sewing kits and that they don't end up in landfill and end up with me who appreciates it is special. So to do the chain stitch, I'll teach you two ways, the real way and then the cheat way. But the cheat way is really effective. And I never knew that existed until I started working at Craft Jam and they told me it existed. So it's quite good. It's called the reverse chain. So to start the chain, I'm going to bring my needle up and I'm going to bring my needle down in almost the same hole. And I'm going to form a bubble like that. I'm now going to decide how long my stitch is. So say my stitch is 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 an inch. I'm going to bring my needle inside the bubble. And then I'm going to pull away from myself. You have to pull away. If you pull towards you, you'll lose your bubble. So you pull, and that's your first chain. Now I make sure I take my needle and I need to put it inside the bubble. So breaking the link would be putting it on top, to the side. It has to go inside. It doesn't have to be exactly where the other one is, just inside the bubble. And now I make my second chain. And I'm just going to keep doing this, bringing my needle inside the bubble. Now you can do this in 2 motions the way I'm doing it, or you can do it in 1. The way you do this in 1 motion is you put your needle in, you then slide it underneath the fabric, and just make sure that this thread, the needle is on top of the thread, and pull it. So this is the fast way to do it versus put your needle in. But this, I teach it this way so you understand the fundamentals of the stitch. But once you understand it, you can do the method, which is a lot quicker, of making a stitch like that and pulling it. Now, the reverse chain is you're going to make one little stitch, and it's going to be basically a throwaway. It's the only time you need to make this little tiny stitch. Now you're going to come down like you're doing the back stitch or the running stitch, and you're going to take your needle under that stitch. So you're forming your loop on top of the fabric. So I bring my needle underneath that stitch and I take my needle back into the fabric here down below. My next stitch, now I come here, and now I have a bigger place to place my needle under. So you're forming the chain in this case on top of your fabric. So it's a flatter, it's less dimensional than the regular chain, but some people just find it easier to do this, to not have to. So it's one of these 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It's easy to control, it's flat, but I love the chain stitch. Either it's the stitch you love or you hate, or hate to love. So if you were to do the narwhal, you could do the chain stitch the same way I did the rainbow, all in the same color, going round and around.
Okay, so when you go up and you make the hoop and you come down again, do you go through that same hole?
So for the regular chain stitch, you mean?
No, this one that you're,
Oh, so for the reverse, no, you're not. So you're
oh, no,
just.
the regular chain, sorry.
Oh, yeah, okay, so for the regular chain, so let's do it right on the narwhal. I'll show you how I would do it. And then how to finish it off. So I would do here, I would start my narwhal. I'd follow my outside line first, like I was doing on the.
So
rainbow.
does that one go into the same hole? No, hole? No.
Yes, so now I need to, it doesn't have to be exactly, it just has to be inside the bubble. So I'm going inside the bubble because you really can't see that hole. As long as you keep going into your bubble, you'll be fine. So it's not the exact same hole, because to be the exact same hole, I'd have to really like look and find it. It's not going outside the bubble. Maybe if I drop the camera down even lower, maybe you can see it better. Put this all here, you can see what's going on down here in my messy floor. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I will. I'll put, it's bouncing around, sorry. Put my needle here. Why are you bouncing? It's like a ride at Disneyland. And then I bring my needle up inside the bubble. So I know, because it's too close to the canvas and I keep hitting it. I just keep going inside the bubble.
Okay.
Yeah, so here you can see here inside the bubble. Now, when you're finished, say you finished your thread, there's no more bubbles. You just put the thread right over that top loop. And then when I start my next one, I would come in with my new thread inside that loop again. So say I finished this and now I was starting with a new piece of thread. I wouldn't just start here on the other side of the bubble. You have to come back into the bubble with a new piece of thread. But you won't be able to tell because it's hidden inside the bubble almost. And it'll be a little bit of time consuming, but it'll be really pretty. So you could do, for the narwhal, you can do the body in maybe the chain stitch, and you can do the other pieces in the satin stitch and mix them up.
Okay.
You know, you don't have to keep one stitch in one thing. I'm going to show you some of the work that I've done. everything kind of packed up. Yeah, because we still have like 5 minutes, but there's so many different techniques. So I love this technique where you just, and this you don't need to draw. My name is Robin, so I took the letter R and I just did, it's the colors that you're responding to. So if you, a lot of embroidery is just a beautiful color palette. So I'm going to teach you as our last stitch, this lovely little rosebud. And then you can just take a shape. I'll teach you that and the French knot. And does everybody have like maybe 10 more minutes, like a little bit extra we can stay on? Yeah, okay. Because I want you to enjoy it. I want you to learn. And you're making me happy, not thinking about the woes of my real estate issues. Ay, ay, ay. So that little rosette is probably, well, everything I say is, this is my favorite stitch. This is my favorite stitch. This stitch is so lovely and it's so easy and it's great for kids' clothing. If you want to do baby clothes, like a little denim jacket, this looks great on the collar. Yeah. And again, if anything isn't clear or you want resources, just I'll put my phone number in the chat right now because I see texts. I never see emails. I've missed emails left, right, and center. It's crazy. So I'm in New York. It's 917-656-5090. Okay, so think of this. We're going to do a little flower here. This is like the spikes of a tire. So you're going to make a circle. Any size, you can use a penny, a quarter, a dime. This can be a rather large one. I'm doing it small. And you're gonna just kind of identify the center and make 5 spikes. It has to be uneven. It could be 3, 5, 7, can't be equal because it's a weaving stitch. I'm gonna go from the center of the circle out to all of my spikes. It's so funny because the stitches that look hard are the easy ones and the ones that are easy look hard. Hard look easy. This one is really easy. So I do my 5 spikes, spokes, not spikes, bicycle spokes. It should look like a bicycle tire. Oh, and by the way, I've done that on the back of a jacket for a bride and groom. They gave me their initials. They gave me the colors of their bouquet and I put both of their initials. It was a commission on the back of the jacket. And in the collar where you flip it up was the date. I think it's on my Instagram if you want to see it. So pretty. Okay, now that I have my 5 spikes, I'm going to bring my needle up into where all the spikes, any of the intersections. And now I'm going to turn my needle upside down again so that I don't stick myself. And I'm just going to start going under, over, under, over. So you skip one and go under the other. And you just start weaving yourself a circle round and round. And as you weave it, you'll see a flower starts to form. So you can see how easy this stitch is. And you're just going to wind it until you cover all 5 of those little spokes. You could make it tighter and it'll move up, it'll be more of a high flower. You can not pull it so tight so it lays flat. But see how the flower is growing? I probably should have done it in a lighter color so you can see that. You're just going over, under, and it'll let you know if you make a mistake. Like if I missed one and I tried to go here, see how it comes right over it? It tells me you're wrong. You just missed one. So you just go back and pull it out. So that's the floral. And then one last stitch, the French knot. I must teach you the French knot because that's really what's in here, is a lot of French knots, which is these little knots, and these flowers. And these are just chain stitches that are unattached, these little loops. And sometimes I just do just like straight little threads. I don't have a specific pattern when I stitch. I'm a very free-formed kind of stitcher. So I'll do the stencil of the R, and then I may maybe decide where my circles are going. And then the rest I just fill in as I please, what color looks good to me, but I don't really plan things out all that often. And then I do another type of work that's really detailed. My Instagram will show you the kind of work I do. It's rather untraditional. I do trees and then cut them out. And I also do study very traditional British embroidery. So
What's your Instagram?
The Hoop NYC.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, thank you. And also I always have tips about fun places in New York. So it's about embroidery and about New York. So if you ever want to come to New York, I'm probably one of the best people you could ask for tips on, being a native and living here forever. So to do the French knot, which again are these, if you're doing monograms, they're great for dotting I's. They're these little controlled knots.
I have a quick question. When you're doing the rows, when you're doing the weaving, is it over, under, or like under, over all the way?
Yes, you're just,
Okay.
and some people find it helpful to say just skip one versus under, over. And then when you get to the end, you just bring your needle to the back and finish it off.
Okay.
But it's a really sweet stitch. To do the French knot, I'm holding the needle in my right hand and I'm holding the thread in my left, about 4 inches up. This is a stitch where you're going to wrap the thread around your needle. Then you're going to pull, like this is where you'll use like physics. This is a pulley. So you want to wrap your thread up here so you can control it, pulley, and then push it down to the fabric and pull it, and you end up with a controlled little knot. Let me show you what happens if you wrap it and don't pay attention and just try to, you'll end up with a loop. So the important thing is, I always say, there's 2 ways to do it. You can wrap it here in the penthouse, pull it to the basement, scrape it along and stick it in. And then you snap it. Or what you could do is, sometimes I wrap it, I stick my needle in, but before I pull it, I tighten it. You want to make sure that these 2 loops are nice and clean around your needle. And then you like kind of give it a snap and then a gentle pull. So, I mean, we've learned the running stitch, the back stitch, chain, I hope a little bit.
Robin,
Yeah.
for the French knot, when you go back in, are you going back in the same hole that you came up?
No, go like right next to it, because if
Okay.
you go in the same hole, you probably will pull your French knot through.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, or?
Want to see what I made?
I want to see what everybody made. I want to do a screenshot. Are you kidding? I live for this. As I said, I've had so many classes where nobody ever like comes on.
Ta-da.
Oh, very good. Amazing. You know what? You've all been here. You've participated. We've had fun. And just want to make sure, does anybody have any other questions or want to ask me, show me designs that I can help you with? I'm happy to hang on.
I have a question. The chain stitch, do you also use it for leaves?
I do. There's if you want to do a leaf though, I might do the satin stitch. I think a leaf, doesn't look like a chain, so it wouldn't be so smooth. I would probably do the satin stitch, or there's a stitch you can look up. It's called the fishbone stitch.
Okay.
YouTube that. That's an amazing leaf stitch because it's basically a series of crisscrosses, and it'll look like you have a vein going down the center. We teach that stitch in our floral embroidery class. If I mean, I could do it quickly if you have, you know.
Like I would be happy to see.
Yeah, okay, why not? You guys are cheering me up. So I will, is it okay if we stay on a little bit longer, Stephanie?
That's okay.
Samantha?
If that's okay with you, Robin.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
This
think
one stitch.
I'll do this one stitch and then that's it. I think I'm
Okay.
avoiding the what I don't want to hear. So, but I do also want everybody to feel like they are being able to do what they need to do. And that's the most important. We're here to have fun and to learn and want to make sure. So if I were to do a leaf, very quickly. So if this was the top of the leaf, see it. Okay, if this was the top of the leaf, I would make like a line like halfway down. This line is just a throwaway line. Then I'd come up to the left of the line, cross over, and bring my needle, like make almost a cross stitch, then come up to the right. So the side you bring your needle up on, you cross over and bring it down. Then if you go down on the left, you bring it up on the left. So you're just doing a series of crisscrosses over that center line, following the outer line, which eventually will give you a full leaf. So you can see how each time you crisscross, it's making a vein in the center. Okay. And if you look up fishbone, it'll look like this.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. I hope we have sunny days ahead since this gray, dreary weather is getting on everybody's last nerve.
Thank you so much, Robin. That was so fun.
Thank you. And feel
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
Robin. Bye,
Thank you.
folks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.